Hey, fellow Jedi. I'm Mike, and you're watching Force Within TV. And tonight, I want to talk about Rebel Rising, a book I just finished reading. It was just published a few weeks ago. I was listening to it on Audible, allowed me to get through it pretty quick on my daily commute. And I'm just going to run down some of the pros and cons of this book. So let's get right into it. The first thing I really enjoyed about the book is getting to know Saw Gerrera and Jyn Erso better. Pretty straightforward there, but we really get to see Saw Gerrera and just how extreme he is. In Star Wars Rebels, of course, a children's show, we really don't get to see. We see, yes, he's at odds with the rebels. He is a bit extreme compared to their ideals, but it really doesn't go far enough. And in this book, it shows just how extreme Saw is and what he is willing to do to take the fight to the Empire. Sorry. We also, of course, get to see Jyn, and really get to know her, get inside her head. Unlike we can do even in Rogue One in a book. And it was very interesting to see just why she's so jaded with the rebels, why she really doesn't like the Empire, but isn't a fan of the rebels either, right? And, we get that in Rogue One when she's having that conversation with Saw at the end. More on that in a bit. Also, I really enjoyed just how connected this was to Rogue One. The book picks up, that early scene with Jyn and her parents when her mother dies. She's, I believe she's 8 years old, and she's down in that pit, and Saw Gerrera comes to get her. It literally picks up from that point, and it goes to the very beginning of Rogue One, where we get to see what she is thinking early on in Rogue One. So it was very interesting to see sort of get some insight, into how she was interpreting things. Again, you can just get so much more insight from a book. It was also interesting to see how this sort of tied in with Thrawn, the Thrawn novel. If you haven't seen my review of that, please check it out. But it tied in really well with the Thrawn novel and the fact that, in the Thrawn novel, there's sort of this, he's trying to figure out what all these resources are being used for in the Empire, not unlike what Saw Gerrera is trying to do and hunt down and figure out exactly why all these resources, the Empire is massing all these resources. Of course, we know in both cases it is the Death Star, so it was just interesting to see it in two books that I just recently read. From different points of view, right? Thrawn within the Empire, Saw as part of the rebellion or a rebel group, I guess. Okay, so, it was also interesting to see just how fractured the rebels were. Thrawn, Thrawn, Saw Gerrera had his group of rebels. There were people he was in contact with that were trying to recruit him to the bigger rebellion cause, which I do believe he does join at one point, because that sort of links up to Star Wars Rebels, where I believe he had a actual rebel unit. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's how it works. And then of course he has a falling out with them. And there was just so many different little groups. It really seemed like there must have been so many different hotspots around the galaxy for the Empire to try and quell. Especially again, this book talking about Thrawn, right? That was what he was dealing with, was putting down some of those rebel groups. And we really don't get the feeling for that in Star Wars Rebels, or even, Star Wars A New Hope. It sort of just feels like there's the one group in A New Hope, the one rebellion, and of course in Star Wars Rebels, we do, there are other cells they do work with, but just not to the extent that we have seen in Thrawn, as well as Rebel Rising. So those are some of the interesting things I thought that I got from the book. Some of the pros. Now, some of the cons, I thought, I'm a big adventure guy. I love action and adventure. And I just thought, with this book, Rebel Rising, there could have been more of that. One of the most disappointing things was how Jin was actually captured and thrown in, the Imperial jail or work camp, whatever you want to call it. It was just sort of lackluster, and I think it did serve a purpose, and it does sort of come around and serve the story in the end. But it just could have been so much. There could have been some action involved with it, and there really wasn't, unfortunately. Likewise, there were some parts of the story that were just glossed over that sounded really interesting, but they weren't really given in detail. And like I said, there just wasn't, even when Jin is with Saw Gerrera, I felt she could have been part of more of the action, whereas basically we just hear about the action. So that was a little bit disappointing. I mean, this book isn't going to be, I'd say it's somewhere in the middle to near the bottom overall in my listing of Canon books. Still a solid read if you're a big fan of Rogue One and Jyn Erso, but I think it could have went a little better or been written with a little more action. Of course, that's my personal bias talking there. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was the end. And, she really seems to come full circle at the end. It ties up. She's in the room talking to Mon Mothma and the other rebel, characters or generals and whatnot. And, she sort of decides, because we get in her head, she sort of decides that she does want to work for the rebellion, right? Light spoiler there, I guess, but she sort of comes around to the fact. But during the movie, she really doesn't seem that way, right? Like it's the events during the movie that sort of seem to really, get her to take action and really go after those Death Star plans. It's meeting her father, meeting Saw Gerrera again, listening to the message from her father, then seeing her father. I really thought that was what ignited the fire in Jin to do what she does in the movie. And I thought the book, the way it wrapped up and her deciding that, yes, I am going to take on this and go with the rebels, didn't quite work with that, right? I mean, my opinion, but I'd be very interested to hear what you think about that as well. So let me know in the comments below what you thought of Rebel Rising. I would give it a solid 7 out of 10. And that's coming from a big Star Wars fan. So keep that in mind. Like I said, my personal bias again is that I wish it would have had a little more action and adventure. So there you go, guys. Thanks so much. Please, like I mentioned earlier, check out my Thrawn review. Head on over to my channel, Force Within TV, and check out, all the playlists that I have now on Season 4, Star Wars Rebels. I'm looking at, character predictions. There's been rumors of certain characters coming back, so check that out. Who will die? It's a big popular topic. I have an entire playlist on that, and I'm also starting a series of playlists on several videos talking about a new possible animation series, so keep your eye on that as well. Thanks for watching, guys, and may the Force be with you always. Please consider subscribing, checking out my Jedi Train Like a Jedi series. Maybe check out a recent video
or down in the video description you will find several links to my website, including a table of contents of all the Train Like a Jedi series.